In the dusty outskirts of Millfield, an auction hammer falls on a neglected storage unit. Sarah Matthews, 7 months pregnant and desperate for a miracle, stands in disbelief at her impulsive $20 bid. The other buyers laugh and move on. They know worthless junk when they see it. But Sarah needs this gamble to pay off. Behind the rusted padlock lies a jumbled collection of forgotten furniture, water-stained boxes, and items deemed unworthy by someone else's life. As Sarah sorts through decades of abandonment, her fingers brush against a small wooden box tucked beneath a tattered quilt. Inside, yellowed photographs and handwritten letters tell a story that makes her heart stop. Could these forgotten treasures hold the key to the questions she's carried her entire life? What would you do if the answers you've been searching for were hiding in someone else's discarded memories? The early morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete lot as Sarah Matthews shifted her weight from one swollen ankle to the other. Her hand instinctively moved to the small of her back, trying to relieve the persistent ache that had become her constant companion these past 7 months. Around her, about 24 people gathered, most of them regulars with clipboards and keen eyes that could spot value beneath dust and neglect. "You sure you want to be out here, honey?" A grey-haired woman with weathered skin glanced at Sarah's prominent belly. "These vultures don't play nice," Sarah forced a smile. "I need this," she whispered more to herself than the woman. 3 months ago, she'd been sitting in her supervisor's office, a bookkeeping position she'd held for 5 years, listening to empty phrases like company restructuring and last in, first out. The severance package lasted 6 weeks. Then came the certified letter from her landlord, the collection calls about medical bills, and finally Mark's text message. "I'm not ready for this. I'm sorry." Now all she had was $200, a nearly maxed-out credit card, and the classified ad she'd spotted last night. Storage unit auction, no minimum bid. "Next up, Unit 219, bellowed the auctioneer, a barrel-chested man with a voice that carried without effort. The metal door rattled upward, revealing a jumble of forgotten possessions catching dust in the sunlight. An old wooden rocking chair, boxes stacked haphazardly. A lamp with a crooked shade, some furniture draped with sheets, like ghosts of a former life. The serious buyers shifted, taking quick inventory with practiced eyes. One by one, they shook their heads and stepped back. Sarah heard murmurs. "Worthless. Nothing but junk. Waste of time. Do I have $20? The auctioneer called, lowering the starting bid to the bare minimum. His gaze swept the crowd, finding no takers. Something pulled at Sarah, perhaps desperation, perhaps instinct. Her paddle rose before she could reconsider. $20 to the young lady. "Do I have 30? Silence fell. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. The regular buyers knew worthless when they saw it. Going once. Going twice. Sold. Unit 219 to paddle 42. Sarah's heart sank as the reality of her impulsive decisions settled in. What had she done? $20 she couldn't spare on what everyone else recognized as garbage. The auctioneer approached, his expression softening as he handed her a key attached to a plastic tag. "First-timer?" he asked, not unkindly. Sarah nodded, her throat suddenly tight. "You've got 3 days to clear it out completely," he explained. "Whatever you don't take goes to the dump, and they'll charge you for the privilege." "Thank you," she managed. "Good luck, sweetheart." He hesitated. "Sometimes these old units surprise you. My cousin once found a box of silver dollars under a stack of National Geographics. You never know." As the crowd moved to the next unit, Sarah stood alone before her purchase. The baby shifted inside her, a flutter of movement that felt like question marks. What now? How would she transport these items? Where would she store them? How could she possibly sort through everything before her due date? She stepped closer to the unit, the musty smell of forgotten things washing over her. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, streaming through the open door. Her $20 now bought her a mountain of decisions, heavy lifting she wasn't supposed to do, and the slim chance of finding something, anything of value. Her hands trembled as she snapped a picture of the unit with her phone. She would need to rent a truck, find help to move the heavier items. The calculator in her mind ran frightening numbers. This gamble might end up costing her more than just the bid price. But as Sarah slipped the key into her pocket, something besides fear stirred within her. For months her life had spiraled beyond her control. The job loss, the pregnancy complications, Mark's abandonment. This jumble of forgotten things was now hers to determine, to sort, to find value in what others had discarded. "We'll make this work," she whispered to her unborn child. One box at a time. The rental truck rumbled to a stop in front of Unit 219. Sarah had splurged on the smallest one available, a decision her bank account protested, but her body thanked her for. The elderly neighbor who'd offered to help her load the heavier items checked his watch. "I've got about 2 hours before my doctor's appointment," Mr. Jenkins said, pulling on work gloves. "Let's make it count." Sarah unlocked the padlock, the metal warm from the midday sun. As the door rolled upward again, the full reality of her purchase confronted her. The unit was deeper than it had appeared during the auction, with narrow pathways winding between stacks of boxes and furniture. "Good Lord," Mr. Jenkins whispered. "This is quite a collection." Sarah fought rising panic. "We need a system," she said, more to calm herself than inform her neighbor. "Furniture first, then boxes. I'll sort into 3 piles: sell, donate, trash." They started with items nearest the door. A water-damaged bookshelf went immediately into the trash category. A small end table with a wobbly leg might be salvageable. Then, partially hidden beneath a dusty sheet, Sarah discovered the rocking chair she'd glimpsed during the auction. "This looks promising," Mr. Jenkins said, wiping away decades of dust with his handkerchief. The wood beneath gleamed with a rich patina. Solid oak, hand-carved. "Doesn't look factory-made." Sarah ran her fingers along the smooth armrest, feeling the gentle curves and careful craftsmanship. "Is it valuable?" "I'm no expert, but my daughter paid $300 for one not half as nice as this at an antique store." He tested the runners. "Still solid. No wobble. $300. Sarah's heart quickened. That would cover next week's rent, with enough left for groceries. As they worked, a picture of the previous owner began to emerge. The furniture pieces spanned several decades, but shared a certain quality. Solidly built, well-maintained, despite their current dusty abandonment. The boxes contained primarily women's possessions, clothing from the 1980s, housewares, books with feminine handwriting in the margins. "I think this belonged to one person," Sarah said, opening a box of photo frames without photos. A woman who lived alone. By the time Mr. Jenkins had to leave, they'd loaded the rocking chair and several promising furniture pieces into the truck. Sarah promised to call if she found anything too heavy to manage alone. As the afternoon stretched on, Sarah methodically sorted through boxes. Most contained ordinary items: kitchen utensils, dated clothing, paperback novels with cracked spines. She found herself creating a 4th category: personal items that seemed too intimate to sell but had no practical value to donate. Around 4 o'clock, she uncovered a box of vintage linens. Beneath embroidered pillowcases and yellowed doilies lay a hand-stitched quilt, its colors still vibrant despite the years. Sarah spread it across the concrete floor, admiring the intricate pattern. "Someone put a lot of love into you," she murmured, tracing the stitches with her finger. Her phone buzzed, a reminder for her prenatal appointment tomorrow. The baby had been quiet today, as if understanding the importance of Sarah's task. She placed a protective hand over her belly. "What do you think, little one? Should we keep the quilt for you?" A flutter of movement answered her. Sarah smiled, her first genuine smile in weeks. She carefully folded the quilt and set it in her keep pile, a new category she hadn't planned on. As evening approached, Sarah surveyed her progress. She'd barely made a dent in the unit's contents, but the truck contained several promising items for resale. The rocking chair alone might justify her impulsive bid. At home, her tiny apartment quickly filled with selected treasures. The rocking chair claimed the corner by her window. She positioned the quilt over its arm, then eased her tired body into its embrace. The chair seemed made for her, supporting her back in all the right places. From this new perch, Sarah opened her laptop and searched for similar antique rocking chairs. Her eyes widened at the listings. Some comparable pieces sold for much more than Mr. Jenkins had estimated. For the first time since the pink line had appeared on the pregnancy test, Sarah felt something like control returning. One good sale. That's all she needed to get started. One small victory to build upon. The baby kicked decisively, as if in agreement. Sarah's hands trembled as she sorted through the stack of envelopes on her kitchen counter. The red past due stamps seemed to grow bolder with each passing day. Electric bill, water, phone, the hospital's payment plan for her last ultrasound. And now, a certified letter from her landlord, the final notice before eviction proceedings. The doorbell rang. Sarah's stomach clenched. She knew who it would be. Mr. Patel stood in the hallway, his expression a practiced blend of sympathy and firmness. "Miss Matthews," he began, his eyes briefly dropping to her belly before meeting her gaze again. "I've been more than patient." "I know," Sarah said quickly, "and I appreciate it. I just need a little more time," he sighed. "The owner is pressing me." "Corporate policy says—" "I have a plan," Sarah interrupted. "I've acquired some valuable antiques. I've already listed several online. The rocking chair alone should cover what I owe." Mr. Patel glanced past her into the apartment, taking in the items now crowding her small living space. "You have 1 week," he said finally. "After that, I cannot delay the paperwork anymore." After he left, Sarah collapsed into the rocking chair, which had quickly become her thinking spot. She pulled out her phone and checked her listing for the 10th time that day. 3 interested buyers had messaged, but no firm offers yet. Her doctor's appointment that afternoon provided no relief from her mounting anxiety. Dr. Wilson frowned as she checked Sarah's blood pressure. "It's elevated again," she said, making notes in Sarah's chart. "And your ankles are quite swollen. I've been on my feet sorting through the storage unit," Sarah explained. "The baby's heartbeat is strong. But I'm concerned about these symptoms." Dr. Wilson's expression grew serious. "If your pressure doesn't improve, we may need to discuss limited bed rest." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "I can't afford to rest. I need to finish clearing that unit and selling what I can. Your health and your baby's health have to come first," Dr. Wilson replied. She handed Sarah a brochure about preeclampsia. "These are the warning signs. If you experience any of them, come to the hospital immediately." On her way home, Sarah's phone chimed with a notification. Someone had purchased the rocking chair for $325, even more than she'd hoped for. The buyer wanted to pick it up tomorrow. For a brief moment, relief washed over her. But simple math quickly tempered her optimism. The chair would cover last month's rent, but what about this month? And the utility bills? And the medical expenses that continued to accumulate? Sarah stopped at the storage unit on her way home. She had just 2 days left before she needed to have everything cleared out or pay for another month she couldn't afford. She'd made good progress with the furniture, but dozens of boxes remained. She opened one containing kitchenware, methodically photographing the better pieces for online listings. A set of vintage Pyrex bowls, a cast-iron skillet perfectly seasoned. Small items individually worth little, but collectively they might make a difference. Her phone rang, an antique dealer responding to her email about some of the furniture pieces. "I'd be interested in taking a look," the man said, "particularly the mahogany side table and the secretary desk you described. I could stop by tomorrow afternoon." Another small victory. Sarah added the appointment to her calendar right after the rocking chair buyer. That evening, she spread her bills across the kitchen table and began calculating. If the furniture dealer took everything she'd earmarked for him, and if her online listings sold quickly, she might, just might, have enough to cover her most pressing debts. But the margins were razor thin and the timeline even thinner. The baby was due in less than 8 weeks. Dr. Wilson had warned that with her blood pressure issues, it could come earlier. As if sensing her thoughts, the baby kicked forcefully. Sarah rubbed her belly. "I know, little one. I'm trying my best here." She looked around her apartment, now crowded with items from the storage unit. Tomorrow, the rocking chair would be gone, the first piece to transition from someone else's forgotten possession to Sarah's financial lifeline. She ran her hand along the smooth wooden arm one last time. 325 down, she whispered to herself. Only 2,700 to go. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of the storage unit, catching motes that danced in the air as Sarah shifted another box. Her back ached, and her feet had long since passed the point of complaining. But the rocking chair sale had energized her determination, and Mr. Harmon, the antique dealer, had purchased several pieces the previous afternoon. 2 more days, she told herself. Just need to finish clearing it out. She'd made significant progress. The furniture was mostly gone now, leaving the concrete floor visible in large patches. What remained were boxes upon boxes, the detritus of someone else's life stacked against the back wall. Sarah worked methodically, opening each container to quickly assess its contents before deciding its fate. Most held ordinary household items, picture frames, kitchen gadgets, decorative knickknacks from another era. The keep, sell, donate trash piles grew steadily throughout the morning. Near midday, Sarah reached a section she hadn't yet explored. The boxes here were stacked differently, tucked into a corner and partially concealed by a metal shelving unit. As she moved the shelf aside, she noticed something she'd missed before. A narrow space between the wall and the boxes, just wide enough for another stack of containers. How did I miss this? She wondered aloud, squeezing into the space. Behind the visible boxes, she discovered several more containers pushed against the back wall. These weren't the standard cardboard moving boxes, but rather plastic tubs with snap-on lids. Sarah pulled one forward, noting it was lighter than expected. Inside was a patchwork quilt, carefully folded and preserved in plastic. Unlike the other quilt she'd found earlier, this one seemed untouched by time, its colors vivid and fabric unworn. Sarah lifted it carefully, and as she did, something solid shifted beneath the folds. Wrapped within the quilt was a wooden box, roughly the size of a small bread box. The wood was dark with age, its surface polished to a deep shine, and intricately carved with a pattern of vines and flowers. A small brass latch, tarnished but intact, held it closed. Sarah's fingers hovered over the latch. Until now, she'd avoided dwelling on the previous owner's personal effects. This was clearly different, something hidden, protected, preserved with care. Opening it felt like crossing an invisible boundary. It's just another item to sell, she told herself, but she didn't believe it. The latch opened with a soft click. Inside, the box was lined with faded red velvet and contained a neatly arranged collection of items. A stack of yellowed envelopes tied with faded blue ribbon, several black and white photographs, and a small silver bracelet. Sarah lifted one of the photographs. A young woman stood beside a flowering tree, her hand raised to shield her eyes from the sun. She wore a dress typical of the 1970s, her hair long and straight around a face that struck Sarah with its familiarity. There was something in the set of the woman's eyes, the curve of her smile, that seemed eerily familiar. She turned the photograph over. Written in faded blue ink was a single line, Elizabeth, Spring 1972. The next photo showed the same young woman sitting on a porch swing beside a young man. They were leaning into each other, faces alight with laughter. Elizabeth and David, 4th of July, read the back. Sarah set the photos aside and carefully untied the ribbon around the letters. The envelopes were addressed to "My dearest Elizabeth" in an elegant flowing script. The return address listed someone named Margaret in Cincinnati. She hesitated before opening the first letter, conscience battling curiosity. These were someone's private memories, not items to be casually perused by a stranger. And yet, something about that young woman's face pulled at her. The silver bracelet lay on the velvet, delicate and small, a child's bracelet. Sarah picked it up, turning it to catch the light. On the underside, a name was engraved in flowing script, Elizabeth. Sarah sat back on her heels, cradling the open box in her lap. Unlike the furniture or kitchenware, these weren't random storage items. This box held someone's most precious memories, carefully preserved and hidden away. The baby kicked suddenly, a sharp movement that startled Sarah from her thoughts. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the strange, fluttering response that always seemed to come when she was most thoughtful. "What am I supposed to do with this?" she asked the empty unit, her voice echoing slightly. She closed the box gently and wrapped it once more in the quilt. And like everything else she'd found, this wouldn't be going into any of her established piles, not yet. First, she needed to understand why those familiar eyes in the photograph had stirred something deep and unnamed within her. The wooden box sat on Sarah's coffee table, its carved surface catching the lamplight. Outside, rain pattered against the window, creating a cocoon of isolation that somehow made the moment feel more intimate. Sarah had spent the day emptying more of the storage unit, but her mind had continually returned to this box and its contents. Now, with her apartment quiet and her work done for the day, she carefully removed each item, arranging them on the table. The photographs, the letters, the silver bracelet, each piece a fragment of someone else's story. She opened the first letter, dated September 1972, the paper thin with age. "My dearest Elizabeth," it began, "I hope this letter finds you well in your new surroundings. Your father still refuses to speak your name, but I want you to know I think of you every day." Sarah read through several letters, piecing together a narrative of family estrangement. Margaret, apparently Elizabeth's mother, wrote of mundane family news, interspersed with veiled references to your situation and difficult choices. Halfway through the stack, Sarah found an envelope thicker than the others. Inside was a folded document she immediately recognized, a birth certificate. The paper was official, embossed with the state seal of Ohio, Elizabeth Ann Collins, she read aloud. Born April 17, 1953, Sarah's pulse quickened as she noted the hospital name, Riverside Methodist in Columbus. The same hospital where she had been born 27 years later. A coincidence, surely. Columbus was a large city with several hospitals, but Riverside was the largest maternity center in the region. She thought back to the few details she knew about her own adoption. Her parents had never hidden the fact that she was adopted, but neither had they provided many specifics. A private adoption, they'd always said. Your birth mother was young and couldn't care for you, but she wanted you to have a good life. Sarah had never felt a pressing need to search for her birth parents. Her adoptive family had given her a happy, stable childhood. But now, holding this stranger's birth certificate, an odd sensation crept over her. She reached for her phone and pulled up her mother's contact. It was late, but Janet Matthews always kept her phone on. "Sarah, is everything okay? Is it the baby?" Her mother's voice was instantly alert. "Everything's fine, Mom. I have a question. Did you ever know my birth mother's name?" A pause on the line. "Why are you asking about this now?" Sarah hesitated. How could she explain the inexplicable pull she felt toward these artifacts from a stranger's life? "I found some items that belonged to someone named Elizabeth Collins. Something about her. I don't know. It made me wonder. Elizabeth." Her mother spoke the name carefully, as if testing it. "No, that doesn't sound familiar. The adoption agency only gave us your birth mother's first initial M, not Elizabeth then." Sarah felt an odd mixture of disappointment and relief. But her mother continued slowly. "I remember your Aunt Catherine mentioning a relative named Elizabeth years ago. Some family scandal from before you were born, Aunt Catherine. I haven't spoken to her in years. She and your father had that falling out over the inheritance. But she might know something about this Elizabeth person if you think there's a connection to our family." After hanging up, Sarah found herself staring again at the photograph of the young woman by the flowering tree. She searched her own memory for any mention of an Elizabeth in family conversations. She found Catherine's number in her contacts list. They hadn't spoken since Sarah's father's funeral 3 years ago, when tension over the family estate had erupted into open hostility. Catherine answered on the 4th ring, her voice wary. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I'm trying to track down information about someone named Elizabeth Collins. Mom thought you might know something about her." The silence that followed was so long, Sarah thought they'd been disconnected. Then in a voice suddenly brittle, "Where did you hear that name?" "I found some of her things. There was a birth certificate that—" "I don't know why you're digging up ancient history," Catherine interrupted, her words clipped. "Elizabeth has nothing to do with you. So you did know her? This conversation is over. Don't call again with this nonsense." The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in confusion. Catherine's reaction had been so sudden, so visceral, not the dismissal of a stranger's name, but the raw response of someone confronted with a painful memory. The baby kicked, a sharp movement that made Sarah wince. She placed her hand over the spot, feeling the answering pressure of a tiny foot or elbow. "Something's not right," she told her unborn child. Why would she react that way? Sarah turned back to the birth certificate, tracing the hospital name with her finger. The same hospital, the strange familiarity of Elizabeth's face, and now her aunt's unmistakable reaction. These weren't coincidences. They were connections. Mr. Harmon arrived precisely at 3 o'clock, his vintage Mercedes purring to a stop outside the storage unit. He was older than Sarah had expected from their phone conversations, mid-70s at least. With a tweed jacket despite the warm afternoon, and a pair of half-moon spectacles perched on his nose. "Miss Matthews." He extended a hand, his grip firm and dry. "William Harmon, a pleasure to meet in person." Sarah had spent the morning preparing for his visit, setting aside the furniture pieces he'd expressed interest in during their calls. The secretary desk, a set of nesting tables, 2 Victorian side chairs with needlepoint seats. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading him into the unit. "I've arranged the pieces over here." Mr. Harmon moved with the deliberate pace of someone who knew the value of careful examination. He ran his fingers along the wood grain of the desk, opened drawers and checked their runners, inspected joints and hardware with a small magnifying glass produced from his pocket. "Solid craftsmanship," he murmured, more to himself than to Sarah. "American, 1880s. The brass fittings are original." He continued his methodical assessment of each piece, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound notebook. Sarah watched, fascinated by his expertise and the reverent way he handled each item. "You've got quite an eye," he said finally, closing his notebook. "These are quality pieces, not museum grade, but certainly collectible. Can you make an offer?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the eagerness from her voice. Mr. Harmon named a figure that exceeded her expectations by several $100s. "I can pay cash today and arrange pickup tomorrow, if that suits." "That would be perfect," Sarah replied, relief washing through her. This sale, combined with her previous ones, would clear her most pressing debts. As Mr. Harmon wrote out a receipt, his gaze wandered to the remaining boxes. "Anything else of interest in your collection? Sometimes the smaller items can surprise you." Sarah hesitated, thinking of the wooden box still sitting on her coffee table at home. "There is one thing I'm curious about. It's not here. I took it home to examine more carefully." She described the carved box and its contents, watching as the antique dealer's expression sharpened with interest. Victorian work by the sound of it. The box itself could have value, depending on the quality of the carving and the wood. "There's also a locket," Sarah added, remembering a detail she hadn't fully explored. "I found it in the bottom compartment beneath the letters." Mr. Harmon's eyebrows rose. "Jewelry from that era can be quite valuable, especially if it's gold or silver with gemstones. I couldn't figure out how to open it. Many Victorian lockets have hidden catches. Would you permit me to take a look? I might be able to help." An hour later, they sat at Sarah's small kitchen table, the wooden box open between them. Mr. Harmon handled each item with white cotton gloves he'd produced from his car, explaining that oils from human hands could damage delicate paper and metal. "Remarkable preservation," he commented, examining the letters without reading their contents. Someone cared deeply for these mementos. He turned his attention to the locket, an oval pendant on a delicate chain, its surface etched with an intricate floral design. His fingers found a nearly invisible seam along one edge. "Ah, here we are." With gentle pressure, the locket clicked open to reveal two tiny photographs preserved under glass. On one side, a young woman Sarah recognized as Elizabeth. On the other, the image of an infant, mid-1970s, I'd say, Mr. Harmon murmured. The craftsmanship of the locket itself is much older, likely passed down through generations. Is it valuable? Sarah asked, monetarily. Perhaps a few $100s to the right collector. He closed the locket carefully. But I suspect its true value lies in its connection to the personal history contained in these letters and photographs. Sarah nodded, oddly relieved that he hadn't suggested she sell it immediately. Miss Matthews, if I may be so bold. Mr. Harmon removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. In my 50 years as an antique dealer, I've seen many collections of personal effects come up for sale after estates are settled. But these items, he gestured to the box, were deliberately preserved, hidden away, and continued to be paid for in storage. They clearly meant a great deal to someone. I know, Sarah admitted. I've been wondering if I should try to find the original owner, or perhaps their family, Mr. Harmon suggested. I've developed something of a knack for tracking provenance. If you're interested, I'd be happy to make some inquiries. Professional curiosity, you might say. Sarah considered his offer. She'd felt drawn to these items from the moment she'd discovered them, and her aunt's strange reaction had only deepened the mystery. I'd appreciate any help, she said finally. There's something about this Elizabeth person that feels important somehow. Mr. Harmon smiled, replacing his glasses. The objects we keep closest tell our truest stories, Miss Matthews. Perhaps this box has found its way to you for a reason. The waiting room of Dr. Wilson's office was unusually crowded. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair, checking her watch for the third time. Her appointment was 20 minutes ago, and the persistent headache that had awakened her that morning was intensifying. She closed her eyes, practicing the breathing techniques from her childbirth class. The past few days had been a whirlwind, finishing the storage unit clear-out, arranging for Mr. Harmon to pick up the furniture pieces, depositing his payment. She'd managed to pay her rent and most urgent medical bills, buying herself precious breathing room. Sarah Matthews. The nurse appeared at the door, clipboard in hand. In the examination room, the nurse frowned at the blood pressure reading. Let's try that again. The second attempt yielded the same result. I'm going to note this for Dr. Wilson. When the doctor arrived, her usual warm smile was replaced with a look of concern. Your pressure's significantly elevated today, Sarah. Any headaches? Dizziness? Swelling beyond your ankles? Some headache, Sarah admitted. And my hands feel puffy. After a thorough examination, Dr. Wilson sat down, her expression serious. I'm concerned about these symptoms. Your blood pressure is 152/98. That's too high. Combined with the headache and swelling, we need to consider the possibility of preeclampsia. What does that mean? It's a condition that can develop during pregnancy. If left untreated, it can be dangerous for both you and your baby. She wrote something on a prescription pad. I'm prescribing partial bed rest for the next week, then we'll reassess. That means you can get up to use the bathroom, prepare simple meals, but otherwise you need to be reclining, preferably on your left side. Sarah's heart sank. Bed rest? I still have so much to do. I need to finish sorting through. This isn't optional, Sarah. Dr. Wilson's voice was gentle but firm. Your body is sending clear warning signals. If your blood pressure continues to rise, we may need to consider early delivery. The prescription felt heavy in Sarah's hand as she drove home. Bed rest. The very idea seemed impossible, with her financial situation still precarious, and the mystery of Elizabeth Collins tugging at her thoughts. In her apartment, Sarah changed into comfortable clothes and reluctantly settled onto her bed, propped up with pillows. The wooden box sat on her nightstand where she'd left it that morning. If she was confined to bed, at least she could use the time to examine its contents more thoroughly. She began with the stack of letters, reading them chronologically. Margaret's early correspondence spoke of Elizabeth's situation obliquely, with references to a private facility where Elizabeth was staying. By early 1973, the tone shifted to discussions of Elizabeth's nursing school plans and a small apartment she'd rented. One letter from August 1973 caught Sarah's attention. "I understand your decision to leave Ohio was difficult, but perhaps a fresh start is what you need. Your father still refuses to discuss what happened, but I've enclosed the baby's hospital bracelet as you requested. I know giving her up was the hardest choice you ever made, my darling, but you must believe it was for the best." Sarah paused, rereading the passage. Elizabeth had given up a baby for adoption. The timing lined up with the photographs in the locket. Elizabeth as a young woman and an infant. Was that why these items had been so carefully preserved? Mementos of a child given away. She thought of the dates on Elizabeth's birth certificate, born in 1953, which would have made her about 20 when she had a baby. Young, but not scandalously so for the early 1970s. Yet the letters suggested a family rift serious enough that Elizabeth had moved away and her father refused to speak of her. The baby kicked, a sudden sharp movement that made Sarah wince. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the firm roundness that housed her own child. What would drive a mother to give up her baby? What circumstances had forced Elizabeth's hand? Her phone rang. Mr. Harmon calling as promised. "I've made some preliminary inquiries," he said after greeting her. Elizabeth Collins graduated from Riverside. Nursing school in 1975, she worked at several hospitals in the Midwest before settling at Mercy General in Springfield. "About 15 years ago, you found her?" Sarah sat up straighter, wincing as her head throbbed. "I found her career path," he clarified. "Whether she's still in Springfield, I can't yet say. These records are somewhat dated. That's still amazing progress." "Thank you. Are you feeling all right, my dear? You sound strained." Sarah explained her doctor's visit and the bed rest order. "Then our investigation must adapt," Mr. Harmon said firmly. "You focus on your health, and I'll continue making inquiries. Perhaps when you're feeling better, we can compile a timeline from these letters to give us a clearer picture." After hanging up, Sarah reached for her laptop. Despite her promise to rest, she couldn't resist a quick search for Elizabeth Collins, nurse, Springfield. No relevant results appeared. She tried various combinations, but came up empty. The headache intensified, a reminder of Dr. Wilson's warnings. Reluctantly, Sarah set aside the laptop and settled back against her pillows. The mystery of Elizabeth Collins would have to wait. Right now, her baby's well-being depended on her following doctor's orders. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the gentle movements beneath. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. "Just not today." 3 days of bed rest had left Sarah restless but compliant. Her headaches had subsided, and her ankles looked less like water balloons. She'd arranged her bedroom into a makeshift command center, laptop, phone, notepad, and Elizabeth's wooden box, all within arm's reach. This afternoon's mission required venturing to the hall closet, where she'd stored important documents in a fireproof box after her parents' deaths. She moved carefully, mindful of Dr. Wilson's instructions, and returned to bed with the small metal container. Inside were birth certificates, her parents'. Her own, along with marriage licenses, death certificates, and a sealed envelope containing her adoption records. She'd never felt compelled to open it before. Her parents had been open about her adoption from the beginning, answering questions as they arose, but never pushing information she hadn't asked for. Sarah broke the seal now, carefully extracting several official-looking documents. The top page was her original birth certificate, listing her birth date, January 12, 1980, and her name, simply Baby Girl, with the surname blacked out. Under mother, there was only a first initial and last name, E.C. Her heart began to race. E.C. Elizabeth Collins? She flipped through the remaining papers. Most contained minimal information, the private adoption having been arranged through an agency that prioritized confidentiality. But one form included a notation that caught her eye. The birth mother was 27 years old, a registered nurse, and in good health with no family history of genetic disorders. 27 in 1980. Born in 1953, the math aligned perfectly with Elizabeth's birth certificate. Sarah reached for her phone with trembling fingers. Catherine might have hung up on her before, but this time Sarah wasn't calling with vague questions. Her aunt answered with obvious reluctance. "What now, Sarah?" "I need to know about Elizabeth Collins." Sarah kept her voice steady. "I have reason to believe she might be my birth mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Catherine sighed, a sound of defeat. "How did you find out about her?" "I bought a storage unit at auction. It contained her things, letters, photographs, personal items." Sarah paused. "Was she your sister?" "Yes." The words seemed dragged from Catherine. "My older sister. She was the family disappointment, according to our father, because she got pregnant. That was part of it." Catherine's voice had taken on a distant quality. "It was 1972. Elizabeth was in college, had a boyfriend our parents didn't approve of, David something. When she got pregnant, our father was furious, sent her away to a home for unwed mothers. She was supposed to give the baby up and come back, pretend nothing had happened, but she didn't. She did at first. Came home, started nursing school, but she was never the same. Started asking questions about the baby, wanting to know if it was a boy or girl, if it had been adopted by a good family. Father refused to discuss it, said she needed to move forward." Sarah's throat tightened. "What happened to the baby?" "Adopted immediately. Closed adoption, that was standard then. Elizabeth was never told anything about who took her child. And then she left after nursing school. Couldn't stand to be around our father anymore. Mother kept in touch secretly. Those must be her letters you found. I only saw Elizabeth a few times after that, at Mother's funeral, and occasionally when she'd visit during Father's final illness." Sarah glanced at the documents spread across her bed. "The baby she gave up in 1973. That wasn't me." "No." Catherine's voice softened slightly. "That baby was given up in 73. You would have been born in what, 1980? Elizabeth had straightened her life out by then. Became a nurse, had her own apartment. I remember she came to visit that Christmas, 1979. She seemed different, distant, left suddenly in the middle of her stay." The timeline clicked into place. Elizabeth's sudden departure during Christmas 1979, just weeks before Sarah's birth in January 1980. Did she ever mention having another child when she gave up in 1980? Another long silence. "Not to me. But we weren't close by then. After Mother died, the family just fractured. My adoption records list my birth mother as E.C. Could that be Elizabeth Collins?" "I suppose it could be." Catherine's voice had grown thoughtful. "It would explain why she was so interested in your adoption when Janet and Robert first brought you home. She asked so many questions that Janet got suspicious." Sarah's breath caught. "She knew my parents?" "She knew me as a baby, briefly. She visited once, when you were about 6 months old. I remember because she brought you this ridiculous silver rattle that must have cost her a week's salary. After that visit, she moved farther away. We lost touch entirely. Do you know where she is now? Is she still alive?" "I have no idea, Sarah. It's been at least 10 years since I've heard anything about her." Catherine paused. "You really think she might be your birth mother?" "The evidence is pointing that way." Sarah's hand drifted to her belly, where the baby moved gently. "I need to know for sure." "Well, if anyone deserves answers, I suppose it's you." Catherine's tone had softened considerably. Elizabeth's old boyfriend was named David Mitchell. He might know something. They were serious before Father intervened. "Thank you," Sarah said sincerely. "That helps. If you do find her," Catherine hesitated. "Tell her I'm sorry. For everything." Sarah returned to the wooden box with renewed purpose, emptying its contents carefully onto her bedspread. She'd examined everything multiple times over the past few days. But perhaps she'd missed something important, something that could lead her directly to Elizabeth. The baby shifted inside her, a gentle rolling movement that had become familiar. "We're getting closer," she murmured, placing a hand on her belly. "I can feel it." She re-examined the letters from Margaret, looking for any mention of addresses or contact information. Most had been sent to Elizabeth at various addresses. First a nursing school dormitory, then a series of apartments in different Midwestern cities. The most recent letter was postmarked 15 years ago. Sarah turned the wooden box over in her hands. It was beautifully made, with dovetailed corners and the intricate vine carvings decorating its surface. On closer inspection, she noticed something she'd missed before, a slight difference in color along one interior edge. She pressed gently, and to her surprise the bottom panel shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. "Clever," she whispered, carefully removing the false bottom. Beneath it lay a small, leather-bound book with a worn cover. Sarah opened it to find pages filled with names, addresses, and phone numbers, many crossed out and updated multiple times. The handwriting matched the signature on Elizabeth's nursing license, cramped but precise, the letters formed with a nurse's efficiency. She flipped through the pages, scanning for familiar names. On page 15 she found it, David Mitchell, with a star drawn beside it. The most recent address listed was in Columbus, with a phone number that had been updated several times, the last entry dated just 3 years ago. Sarah reached for her phone, then hesitated. What would she say to this stranger? "Hello, I think your old girlfriend might be my birth mother." But David Mitchell represented her strongest connection to Elizabeth's past, a potential key to finding her. With a deep breath, she dialed the number. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3, then a recorded message. "You've reached the Mitchell residence. Leave a message." Sarah hung up without speaking, suddenly unsure. Perhaps a direct approach wasn't best. She continued examining the address book, noting that several entries had symbols beside them, stars, hearts, small check marks. A system of importance, perhaps. A name on the next page caught her eye. Ruth Anderson, with both a star and a heart drawn next to it. The most recent address was in Springfield, the same city where Mr. Harmon had traced Elizabeth's nursing career. Unlike most entries, Ruth's information showed fewer updates, as if she had remained in one place while Elizabeth moved frequently. This time, Sarah didn't hesitate. She dialed the number. "Hello?" The voice that answered was elderly but alert. "Is this Ruth Anderson?" "Yes, who's calling, please?" Sarah took a deep breath. "My name is Sarah Matthews. You don't know me, but I'm trying to locate someone you might know. Elizabeth Collins." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Elizabeth? Good heavens. I haven't heard from her it must be 5 years now. How do you know Lizzie?" The familiar nickname caught Sarah off guard. I think she might be related to me. I found some of her belongings in a storage unit I purchased." "A storage unit? That sounds like Lizzie, always keeping things, never throwing anything away." Ruth's voice grew concerned. "Is she all right? Why are you calling me instead of her?" "I don't know where she is," Sarah admitted. "I was hoping you might." A long pause followed. "This is very strange. Who did you say you were again?" Sarah decided to take a risk. "I have reason to believe Elizabeth Collins might be my birth mother. I was born in January 1980 and adopted shortly after." Another silence, this one heavier. "Oh my," Ruth finally said, her voice softened. "Oh my goodness. You're the baby." Sarah's heart leaped. "You know about me?" "Lizzie told me everything, dear. We were roommates in nursing school, stayed close ever after. She never stopped thinking about you. Her second baby, the one she had to give up. Then it's true." Sarah's voice caught. "Elizabeth is my birth mother?" "She never told me your name, wasn't allowed to know it because of the closed adoption. But the timing matches what she told me." Ruth paused. "Would you be willing to meet in person? This isn't a conversation we should have over the phone, and I have photos, things Lizzie shared with me over the years." "Yes," Sarah agreed immediately. "I'm on bed rest right now because of my pregnancy, but my doctor has an appointment with me in 2 days. If everything looks good, I could meet you afterward. You're pregnant." Ruth's voice held a note of wonder. "Elizabeth is going to be a grandmother." Then her tone shifted slightly. "That is, if we can find her." They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near Dr. Wilson's office, exchanging descriptions so they would recognize each other. After hanging up, Sarah sat motionless, overwhelmed by the confirmation of what she'd suspected. Elizabeth Collins was her birth mother, and Ruth, this woman who had been Elizabeth's confidant, knew the story Sarah had never heard. Why she had been given up, what circumstances had forced that choice. The baby kicked a strong, decisive movement. Sarah smiled through sudden tears. "We're going to find her," she promised, both to herself and her unborn child. "We're going to complete the circle." The cafe was nearly empty at 3 o'clock, just as Ruth had suggested it would be. Sarah arrived first, selecting a corner table that offered both privacy and a clear view of the entrance. Dr. Wilson had been cautiously optimistic about her improved blood pressure readings, but had extended the bed rest order for another week, with an exception for this meeting. "Some things are medicine for the soul," the doctor had said with unexpected understanding when Sarah explained the situation. When the door chimed, Sarah looked up to see a small, white-haired woman scanning the room. Despite her age, at least 80, Sarah guessed, Ruth Anderson moved with purpose, her back straight and her gaze sharp behind tortoiseshell glasses. She carried a worn leather handbag and tucked under one arm a large manila envelope. Sarah raised a hand in greeting, suddenly nervous. Ruth's face brightened with recognition, and she made her way to the table. "Sarah," she said, her voice warm as she settled into the chair opposite. "I would have known you anywhere." "You have her eyes." "I do." The simple observation caught Sarah off guard. No one had ever mentioned her eyes resembling anyone else's. Ruth nodded, opening her handbag and extracting a photo album bound in faded blue cloth. "I brought these to show you. Lizzie and I have been friends for nearly 50 years, roommates at nursing school, then colleagues at Memorial Hospital." She opened the album to the first page. This was 1974, our first day of clinical rotations. Sarah leaned forward to examine the photograph. 2 young women in starched white uniforms stood arm in arm, their caps neatly pinned, faces bright with youth and possibility. She recognized Elizabeth immediately from the photos in the wooden box, taller than Ruth. With the same eyes Sarah saw in her own mirror each morning, she was the smartest in our class, Ruth continued, turning pages that chronicled their nursing school years. So determined. Some of the other girls were just there to find doctor husbands, but not Lizzie. She wanted to make a difference because of the baby she had given up. Sarah asked quietly. Ruth nodded. That experience changed her. She never talked about it with most people, but she told me everything. How her father had sent her away to have the baby in secret. How she'd never even been allowed to hold her daughter before they took her away. That was in 1973, Sarah clarified. Yes, her first child, a little girl she named Hannah, though only in her heart, since she wasn't permitted to name her officially. Ruth turned to a later section of the album. These are from after graduation. Lizzie worked in maternity at first. She wanted to support other young mothers, especially those facing difficult decisions. The photos showed Elizabeth in various settings, hospital corridors, staff parties, casual outings. In every image, Sarah could detect a certain reserve in her expression, a shadow behind her smile. What happened in 1979? Sarah asked. My Aunt Catherine mentioned Elizabeth visited for Christmas, but left suddenly. Ruth's expression grew somber. That was a difficult time. Lizzie had been seeing someone, a doctor at the hospital named Richard. When she discovered she was pregnant again, he made it clear he wasn't interested in fatherhood. Lizzie was devastated but determined not to repeat the past. She was financially stable, had her career. She planned to raise the child herself. But she didn't, Sarah said softly. She gave me up. Ruth reached across the table to touch Sarah's hand. Her father got involved again. Somehow he found out about the pregnancy during that Christmas visit. He threatened to cut off her younger sister, your Aunt Catherine, financially if Elizabeth brought scandal on the family again. Catherine was in college then, completely dependent on her father. So Elizabeth gave me up to protect Catherine. The realization stung in ways Sarah hadn't expected. She made the hardest choice imaginable, twice. Ruth opened the manila envelope and removed a letter, its paper thin with age. She wrote this to you the day you were born, though she never expected you'd read it. She gave it to me to keep, just in case someday you found each other." Sarah accepted the letter with trembling hands. "Did she try to find me?" "When the laws changed, allowing birth mothers more access, she hired a private investigator. But the adoption agency had closed. Records were sealed or missing. All she knew was that you'd gone to a couple named Matthews. She knew my adoptive parents' name. It was unusual for a closed adoption, but your adoptive mother had reached out to her anonymously through the agency, sent a photo of you at 6 months, with just their last name written on the back. Elizabeth treasured that photo. Ruth turned to the last page of her album, where a familiar baby picture was carefully preserved, the same one that sat on Sarah's parents' mantel for years. "Did she ever find happiness?" Sarah asked, staring at the evidence that her birth mother had indeed known of her, thought of her over all these years. Ruth smiled sadly. "She built a good life, became a dedicated nurse specialized in neonatal care. But there was always a part of her heart missing. She never had other children. And where is she now?" Ruth's expression shifted. 3 years ago, Elizabeth was diagnosed with breast cancer. The treatment was difficult, but she responded well initially. Then it metastasized. Last I knew, she was participating in a clinical trial at Brighton Medical Center in Cleveland. Is she... Sarah couldn't bring herself to finish the question. "I don't know, dear. We exchanged Christmas cards last year, but I haven't heard from her since." The return address was a temporary apartment near the medical center. Ruth hesitated. Elizabeth was always private about her struggles. She wouldn't want me to worry. "I need to find her," Sarah said, the certainty crystallizing within her. "Before my baby comes." "I think that would heal something in both of you," Ruth replied gently. "But prepare yourself, Sarah. 3 years with metastatic cancer. She may be very ill." Sarah nodded, placing one hand over the letter and the other on her rounded belly. 2 generations connected by a woman neither had truly known, yet who had shaped both their lives through her choices, her sacrifices, and her absence. The modest 2-story house looked nothing like Sarah had imagined. She'd pictured Elizabeth living somewhere that reflected the careful organization of her belongings, perhaps a neat townhouse with window boxes. Instead, a family with young children now occupied the Springfield address Ruth had provided. "We've been here about 1.5 years," explained the young mother who answered the door. A toddler balanced on her hip. "The previous owner was an older woman who moved for health reasons, I think. That's all the real estate agent told us. Did you get any mail for her after you moved in? Any forwarding information?" Sarah asked. The woman shook her head. "Nothing. Sorry I can't be more help." Back in her car, Sarah considered her next move. Her one-day reprieve from bed rest was ticking away, and she'd promised Dr. Wilson she wouldn't overdo it. The doctor had been clear. Her blood pressure, while improved, remained concerning. She unfolded Elizabeth's nursing license, which she'd found tucked in the address book. Mercy Hospital in Springfield had been her most recent employer, according to Ruth's information. It wasn't much, but it was her best lead. The hospital's HR department couldn't provide employee information to non-family members, a policy the receptionist recited with practiced firmness. "I believe I am family," Sarah said quietly, placing both hands on her rounded belly. "I have reason to believe Elizabeth Collins is my birth mother. I'm trying to locate her because of potential genetic health concerns for my baby." The receptionist's expression softened slightly. "Wait here." 20 minutes later, Sarah sat across from an HR manager whose nameplate read Diane Levinson. "I understand your situation," Diane said, "but I hope you understand ours. Patient and employee confidentiality is something we take very seriously. I'm not asking for medical details," Sarah clarified. "Just her current contact information, or when she left the hospital." Diane typed something into a computer. "I can confirm that Elizabeth Collins worked here as a registered nurse until 3 years ago. She took medical leave and eventually resigned her position." She hesitated. "I'm sorry, but that's all I can share officially. Something in the woman's emphasis on officially gave Sarah hope. "Thank you for that information," she said, rising to leave. As she reached the door, Diane spoke again. "The third-floor nurses' station. Maternity ward. Judy Chen has been head nurse there for 15 years. Sarah nodded gratefully. The maternity ward was busy, the nurses' station staffed by 3 harried-looking women in colourful scrubs. Sarah waited until the tallest one, whose badge read Judy Chen, RN, stepped away from the others. "Excuse me," Sarah began. "I'm looking for information about Elizabeth Collins. I was told you might be able to help." Judy studied her carefully, taking in Sarah's pregnant form and hopeful expression. "Are you a former patient?" "No, I'm her daughter." The nurse's eyebrows rose. "Elizabeth never mentioned having children. It's complicated. We've never met. I was adopted as a baby, and I've only recently discovered who my birth mother is." Judy's professional reserve softened. Elizabeth was a gifted nurse. The families she helped, especially those with premature babies, still send cards years later. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "When she got sick, it hit everyone hard. She was so strong through the treatments, kept working as long as she could. Do you know where she went after leaving here? She moved to Cleveland for specialized treatment. Some experimental protocol at Brighton Medical." Judy hesitated. "We kept in touch at first. She seemed to be doing well initially. Then the updates became less frequent. My last email bounced back about 6 months ago." Sarah's heart sank. "Do you think she's—" "I don't know," Judy admitted. "She was very private about her struggles. Never wanted anyone's pity. But she gave me her oncologist's contact information in case any of her former patients needed her medical history for their children." She wrote a name and number on a notepad. "Dr. Simmons, I can't promise he'll talk to you, but it's worth trying." "Thank you," Sarah said, accepting the information. "Did Elizabeth ever mention anything about her past? About having a baby?" Judy shook her head. "Not specifically, but she had a special touch with young mothers who were giving babies up for adoption. She could connect with them in a way none of the rest of us could." She paused. "There was a photograph she kept in her locker, a baby, maybe 6 months old. I assumed it was a favorite patient, but maybe it was me," Sarah finished softly. "I've learned she had a picture of me that my adoptive mother sent anonymously." "You have her eyes," Judy said suddenly. "I didn't see it at first, but now that I'm looking, definitely Elizabeth's eyes." It was the second time someone had noted the resemblance, and something warm unfurled in Sarah's chest at the confirmation of this connection. "One last thing," Judy added. "Elizabeth donated some of her personal items to the hospital's charity auction before she left. Most things sold, but no one bid on an old nursing textbook. I kept it because she'd made so many notes in the margins." She reached into a desk drawer. "I was going to mail it to her once I had a stable address. Maybe you should have it now." Sarah accepted the worn textbook, opening it to find neat, precise handwriting filling the margins. The same handwriting from the address book. A tangible piece of the woman she was trying to find. "I'm going to keep looking," Sarah promised, as much to herself as to the nurse. "If I find her, I'll tell her about the people here who remember her." Judy smiled. "Tell her Judy says to check her damn email once in a while. Some of us still worry about her." Sarah's third day of calling Dr. Simmons' office finally yielded results. Not an appointment, but an acknowledgement from his assistant that her message had been received. "Doctor-patient confidentiality prevents him from discussing Elizabeth Collins' case," the assistant explained. "But he suggests you continue sorting through her belongings. He says she kept everything important." The cryptic message left Sarah puzzled but determined. She returned to the wooden box and its contents, methodically re-examining each item. There had to be something she'd missed. Something that would lead her to Elizabeth, or at least provide more information about her condition. Mr. Harmon called that afternoon with a small breakthrough. "I tracked down the storage facility owner," he reported. "Elizabeth Collins paid for that unit for 23 years. Always on time until last December, when the payments stopped coming. That's why it went to auction." "December," Sarah repeated. 6 months ago. Right around when Judy's emails had started bouncing back. "There's more," Mr. Harmon continued. The owner remembered her because she'd visit the unit a couple times a year. Said she was a nice lady, always pleasant. The last time he saw her was November. She looked thin, he said, but was in good spirits. November. Still alive, at least then. After hanging up, Sarah turned to the nursing textbook Judy had given her. She flipped through pages dense with technical information, margins filled with Elizabeth's neat handwriting. Most notes were clinical observations or memory aids, but occasionally personal comments appeared. Remember Mrs. Jenkins, same symptoms. Check family history, or ask Dr. Martin about alternative approach. Sarah was about to set the book aside when a small, leather-bound journal fell from between its pages. Unlike the textbook, this was clearly personal. A medical diary Elizabeth had kept during her illness. Sarah hesitated before opening it, feeling like an intruder. But if her birth mother had tucked this journal into a book she'd left behind, perhaps she'd meant for it to be found eventually. The first entry was dated 3 years ago. Diagnosis confirmed today. Stage 2B. Dr. Simmons recommends aggressive approach. Surgery scheduled for Tuesday. Sarah read through months of treatment documentation, Elizabeth's clinical detachment occasionally giving way to raw emotion. Hair coming out in clumps. Vanity is the least of my concerns, but still hard to see in the mirror. And later, first clean scan. Cautiously optimistic, thinking more about the daughter I never knew. If genetic testing confirms BRCA1, should I try to find her? Does she have a right to know? The entries grew more sporadic over time, then abruptly shifted tone 18 months ago. Cancer has returned. Metastasis to liver. Standard treatments exhausted. Dr. Simmons recommends clinical trial at Brighton Medical Center. The final pages contained Elizabeth's careful documentation of the experimental treatment protocol, side effects, and blood work results. But interspersed among medical notes were increasingly frequent mentions of adoption registries and private investigators. Another dead end. Agency records destroyed in flood.
Should I give up searching?
Time may be running out. The last entry, dated just 7 months ago, made Sarah's breath catch. Tumors not responding as hoped. Trial moving to phase 2 with adjusted protocol. Putting affairs in order. Continued storage unit payments for another year. Maybe someday she'll find me. Left letter with Ruth just in case. Some things must be said even if never heard. Sarah closed the journal, emotions tangled and raw. Elizabeth was searching for her even while fighting for her life. And based on the final entry, had been alive just 7 months ago, though clearly very ill. She picked up her phone and called Dr. Wilson's office. I'd need to know about genetic testing for BRCA mutations, she explained to the nurse. My birth mother had breast cancer that metastasized, and I'm concerned about hereditary risk factors. The next morning, Sarah sat in Dr. Wilson's office, explaining what she'd learned about Elizabeth. This is significant family history, Dr. Wilson agreed. I'll order the appropriate genetic tests immediately. The results will be important not just for you, but potentially for your child. How long will testing take? About 2 weeks for comprehensive results. In the meantime, I want to discuss your birth plan in more detail, given these new concerns and your blood pressure issues. As Sarah left the office with paperwork for the lab tests, she felt a newfound urgency. Elizabeth had spent years searching for her, and now Sarah was racing against time to find Elizabeth. The journal suggested she might still be at Brighton Medical Center, but in what condition? She called the hospital's main number from her car. Brighton Medical Center, how may I direct your call? I'm trying to locate a patient who was in a clinical trial for metastatic breast cancer. Elizabeth Collins. I'm sorry, but we can't provide patient information over the phone. Sarah closed her eyes, frustration mounting. Please, she's my birth mother. I only recently discovered who she is, and I need to find her before... She couldn't finish the sentence. The operator's voice softened slightly. I understand your concern, but I still can't confirm if she's a patient here. Hospital policy. Can you at least tell me if Dr. Simmons is affiliated with your oncology department? Yes, he oversees several of our clinical trials, a small victory. Elizabeth's oncologist was still at Brighton. Sarah had a direction now, if not a definitive location. Back at home, she spread out a calendar and began making calculations. She was entering her 8th month of pregnancy. Blood pressure still concerning. Genetic testing would take 2 weeks. If she could confirm Elizabeth's location, could she safely travel to Cleveland? What if her condition worsened? What if Elizabeth's condition worsened in the meantime? The baby kicked insistently, as if sensing her turmoil. "I know," Sarah whispered. "We need to find her soon." The university campus sprawled before Sarah as she navigated her way toward the science building. Her doctor's reluctant permission for this excursion had come with strict conditions. No more than 2 hours away from home, frequent rest breaks, and a promise to monitor her blood pressure with the portable cuff Dr. Wilson had loaned her. The department directory listed Dr. David Mitchell, professor of chemistry, in room 317. Sarah took the elevator, one hand resting on her belly as the baby shifted restlessly. The hallway was quiet. Most classes finished for the day. Outside room 317, a small plaque confirmed she'd found the right office. She knocked, suddenly nervous. What if he refused to see her? What if he had no memory of Elizabeth? "Come in," called a deep voice. The office was cluttered but organized, bookshelves crammed with textbooks and journals, walls covered with framed diplomas and scientific conference posters. Behind a desk stacked with papers sat a man in his early 70s, silver-haired and bespectacled, his face lined but his blue eyes sharp and alert. "Professor Mitchell, I'm Sarah Matthews. I called yesterday about Elizabeth Collins." His expression changed instantly, softening with recognition of the name. "Yes, of course. Please sit down." He gestured to a chair, watching as she lowered herself carefully. "You said on the phone you had something that belonged to Elizabeth." Sarah opened her bag and removed the bundle of love letters she'd found in the wooden box. These were addressed to her. "They're from you." David Mitchell accepted the faded envelopes with visible emotion, his hands trembling slightly. "I haven't seen these in nearly 50 years, he murmured. "I didn't know she kept them. They were in a storage unit she maintained for decades," Sarah explained. "When the payment stopped, it went to auction. I was the buyer, and now you're trying to find her. It wasn't a question. Yes, but there's more to it than that." Sarah took a deep breath. "Professor Mitchell, Elizabeth Collins is my birth mother." He stared at her, his expression unreadable. "That's not possible," he said finally. "Elizabeth and we lost touch after college. She never had children." "She had 2, Sarah corrected gently. "A daughter in 1973 that she was forced to give up for adoption. And me, born in 1980, also adopted." David Mitchell removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. 1973, he repeated. "That would have been right after—" His voice trailed off. "After her father sent her away," Sarah finished. "When she was pregnant with your child." The color drained from his face. "My child. Elizabeth was pregnant when she disappeared." His voice had grown hoarse. "I had no idea." "She never told me." "You didn't know?" Sarah was genuinely surprised. Ruth had described a boyfriend Elizabeth's parents disapproved of, but she'd assumed he'd been part of the decision. "I came back from spring break to find she'd withdrawn from school. No explanation, no forwarding address. Her roommate claimed not to know anything." He shook his head slowly. "I tried to find her for months. Eventually, I had to accept that she'd chosen to leave without saying goodbye." "She didn't choose to leave," Sarah said softly. "Her father forced her to go to a home for unwed mothers. She wasn't allowed to contact you." David Mitchell looked down at the bundle of letters, 50-year-old pain etching deeper lines in his face. "I never stopped wondering what happened to her. I looked her up occasionally over the years, but never found much. These might help fill in some gaps." Sarah withdrew several photographs from her bag, images Ruth had shared, showing Elizabeth through the decades. She became a nurse, specialized in neonatal care. "Never married. He examined each photograph carefully, lingering over one of Elizabeth in her nursing uniform. "She looks happy here," he said. "I'm glad for that." He looked up at Sarah. "But I still don't understand why you're coming to me now." "I'm trying to find her before my baby is born," Sarah explained, placing a hand on her belly. "Elizabeth has been battling cancer, and I've lost her trail in Cleveland. I hoped you might know something that could help me locate her." "Cancer?" His concern was immediate and genuine. "Is she all right?" "I don't know. The trail went cold about 6 months ago." David Mitchell was silent for a long moment. Then decisively he opened a drawer and withdrew a small wooden box remarkably similar to the one Sarah had found. From it he removed an old photograph. Elizabeth as a young woman, sitting on a campus bench, laughing at something off camera. "I kept this all these years," he said quietly. "My greatest regret was not fighting harder to find her." He studied Sarah's face intently. "You have her eyes," he said finally. "And something about your smile." He paused. "You said Elizabeth had a baby in 1973. A daughter?" Sarah nodded. "I've learned very little about her first child, only that it was a girl who was immediately adopted. And the father was me?" His voice broke slightly on the question. "According to her friend Ruth, yes. Elizabeth was dating you when she became pregnant." David Mitchell closed his eyes briefly. "I have a daughter I never knew about," he whispered, more to himself than to Sarah. "And now a grandchild on the way." He looked at Sarah's belly with wonder. "Life takes such unexpected turns. Would you be willing to take a DNA test?" Sarah asked gently. "It would confirm everything, and it might help me find Elizabeth if we can prove a biological connection." "Of course," he agreed immediately. "I'll do anything that might help." He hesitated. "And if the test confirms I'm your biological grandfather, I'd like to be part of your life, if you're open to that." "I'd like that too," Sarah said, surprised by the emotion welling up within her. "I think Elizabeth would want us to find each other, even if we can't find her." "We'll find her," David said with sudden determination. "I lost her once without fighting for her. I won't let that happen again." The DNA test results arrived via email, while Sarah was sorting through another box from the storage unit. This one contained what appeared to be Elizabeth's professional life: nursing certifications, continuing education certificates, performance reviews that consistently praised her compassion and skill. Sarah's phone chimed with the notification. She opened the email, heart racing as she scanned the clinical language of the report. The conclusion was unambiguous: a 99.9% probability that David Mitchell was her biological grandfather. The genetic connection Ruth had suggested, that Sarah had felt instinctively, was now confirmed by science. She called David immediately. "I just got the results," she said when he answered. "You're definitely my grandfather." His voice, when he responded, was thick with emotion. "I suspected as much from the moment I saw you. You have so many of Elizabeth's mannerisms. The way you tilt your head when you're thinking, how you fold your hands when you're nervous. I never knew I was doing either of those things," Sarah admitted, suddenly aware of her folded hands. "I've been thinking about our next steps," David continued. "I have a colleague who specializes in oncology research. He's made some inquiries at Brighton about their clinical trials. He can't access Elizabeth's records, of course, but he confirmed that the metastatic breast cancer trial is ongoing, with patients receiving treatment on an outpatient basis, so she could still be in Cleveland, even if she's not hospitalized." "Exactly. I've taken a few days of personal leave." "I think we should go to Cleveland together." Sarah hesitated. "My doctor doesn't want me traveling that far. My blood pressure is still concerning, and I'm starting my 8th month." "I understand. Let me go first then. I can do the legwork. And once I've located her, perhaps your doctor would approve a single, carefully planned visit." It was a sensible approach, but Sarah felt a pang of disappointment. She'd come so close to finding Elizabeth. The idea of waiting longer was difficult to accept. "Let me think about it," she said. "In the meantime, I'm still going through her things. There might be more clues." After hanging up, Sarah returned to the box she'd been examining. Beneath a folder of certificates, she found a small leather album containing photographs of newborns, tiny premature babies connected to tubes and monitors, their parents' faces a mixture of fear and hope. On the back of each photo, Elizabeth had written names and dates, along with brief notes. Henry went home today, 5 lbs 2 Aussie, or Clara's first time breathing without assistance. A document at the bottom of the box caught Sarah's attention, a deed of trust. She scanned the legal language, understanding just enough to realize Elizabeth had established a small trust fund. The beneficiary section was blank with a notation, "To be determined." Sarah set it aside, making a mental note to ask David if he could help decipher the document's full meaning. She was about to close the box when she noticed something peculiar. The interior dimensions didn't match the exterior. The bottom seemed too shallow. Pressing gently along the edges, she discovered a false bottom, similar to the one in the wooden box. Beneath it lay a sealed envelope, the paper high quality and cream-colored, addressed simply, "To my daughter." Sarah's hands trembled as she carefully opened it, taking care not to tear the contents. Inside was a letter written in Elizabeth's neat, precise handwriting, dated just 6 months earlier. "My dearest daughter," it began. "If you are reading this, then somehow, against all odds, my belongings have found their way to you. I've imagined this possibility for years, that someday the items I've so carefully preserved might become breadcrumbs leading you back to me." Sarah settled into a comfortable position, cradling her belly with one hand as she continued reading. "I don't know your name or what life you've lived. I don't know if you're happy, if you've been loved as you deserve to be. These unknowns have haunted me through the years. I've searched for you through adoption registries, private investigators, genetic testing services. Each dead end was a small heartbreak, yet I never stopped hoping. Now time may be running short for me. Cancer is a formidable opponent, and though I've fought with every ounce of strength, the outcome remains uncertain. I'm participating in a clinical trial at Brighton Medical Center in Cleveland, a last hope. But not without promise. If you've found these belongings, you've discovered that I kept everything that mattered. The wooden box contains mementos of your biological father, David Mitchell, a good man who never knew about you. I couldn't bear to part with his letters or the photographs of our brief time together. I've often wondered if you have his gentle nature or scientific mind. The trust fund I established years ago was intended for you, though I had no way to find you to transfer it. The paperwork is included with these belongings. It isn't a fortune, but perhaps it will help with education or a first home or whatever dreams you're pursuing. Most importantly, I want you to know that not a day has passed when I haven't thought of you. Giving you up was the hardest choice I ever made. A choice forced by circumstances and family pressures that seemed insurmountable at the time. I've spent a lifetime wondering if I should have fought harder, been braver. I continue paying for this storage unit as a kind of time capsule, a message in a bottle cast into the uncertain future. If you're reading this, the bottle has somehow reached its intended shore. I'm at Brighton through December at least. After that, my future is uncertain. If fate allows, perhaps we might yet meet, with all the love a mother's heart can hold. Elizabeth Collins. Sarah pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. 6 months ago, Elizabeth had been alive just 6 months ago, and had left this trail of breadcrumbs, hoping Sarah might follow it. The baby kicked, a strong, definitive movement. "I know," Sarah whispered. "We're going to find her. The compromise was Dr. Wilson's idea. I can't clear you for a 5-hour drive to Cleveland," she'd explained at Sarah's appointment. "But I can refer you to a specialist at University Hospital there. They have an excellent high-risk pregnancy unit, and the consultation would justify the trip medically." She'd fixed Sarah with a pointed look. "As long as you have someone driving you and you take frequent breaks." David had immediately offered his car and companionship. "We'll make a day of it," he'd said. Stop whenever you need to. Take it easy. Now, 3 days later, Sarah gazed out the passenger window as Cleveland's skyline came into view. Her back ached from the long drive despite their hourly stops, and her ankles had swollen despite the compression stockings Dr. Wilson had recommended. But they were here, just minutes away from Brighton Medical Center, where Elizabeth had last been documented. "How are you feeling?" David asked, glancing over with concern. "Nervous," Sarah admitted. "What if we can't find her? Or what if we do, but she's too ill to see us? Or doesn't want to?" David reached over to pat her hand. "One step at a time. First we find out if she's still there. Then we respect whatever her wishes might be." Brighton Medical Center was an imposing complex of glass and steel, its multiple buildings connected by enclosed walkways. David found parking in the visitor garage, then helped Sarah navigate to the main entrance. Her appointment with the specialist wasn't until 3 o'clock, giving them several hours to search for information about Elizabeth. At the information desk, an elderly volunteer looked up from her computer. "How may I help you?" Sarah had rehearsed this moment. "We're trying to locate a patient who might be participating in a clinical trial here." Elizabeth Collins. "She's my birth mother, and I've only recently found out who she is." The volunteer's expression softened with sympathy, but her response was predictable. "I'm sorry, dear, but I can't confirm whether someone is a patient here. Privacy regulations." "We understand," David said smoothly. "Perhaps you could direct us to the clinical trials office. We'd like to speak with someone about the metastatic breast cancer study specifically." The volunteer provided directions to a different building along with a campus map. As they walked through a skyway connecting the buildings, Sarah paused to catch her breath, one hand pressed against her side. "Braxton Hicks," she explained, seeing David's alarmed expression. "Practice contractions. Perfectly normal at this stage." The clinical trials office was a small suite on the 4th floor. A receptionist greeted them with professional courtesy. "How can I help you today?" David took the lead, explaining their situation while carefully avoiding direct questions about Elizabeth's patient status. "We're trying to connect with Dr. Simmons, the oncologist, overseeing the metastatic breast cancer trial. It's a family health matter." The receptionist checked a calendar. "Dr. Simmons is with patients all afternoon, but his research assistant might be able to help. Let me see if she's available." Minutes later, a young woman in a lab coat appeared. "I'm Emma Lawson, Dr. Simmons' assistant. I understand you have questions about our trial?" Sarah decided directness was their best approach. "I'm looking for my birth mother, Elizabeth Collins. She's been participating in your clinical trial for metastatic breast cancer. This is my biological grandfather, David Mitchell." She indicated the small badge clipped to Emma's coat. "That's her trial badge in the photo you're wearing." Emma glanced down at the ID badge, which featured a small pink ribbon. "This is just a breast cancer awareness symbol." "No," Sarah insisted gently. "In the background of that photo there's a clinical trial badge. I've seen it before in Elizabeth's journal." Emma studied Sarah more carefully, then glanced at David. "I really can't discuss specific patients. We are not asking for medical information," David clarified. "We just need to know if she's still here, with us." Sarah is 8 months pregnant with Elizabeth's grandchild. "Time is of the essence." Emma's professional reserve wavered. "Wait here," she said finally, disappearing through a door marked "Staff Only." When she returned 10 minutes later, her expression had changed. "Dr. Simmons would like to speak with you briefly. Please follow me." They were led to a small consultation room where a distinguished man in his 60s waited. "Miss Matthews? Mr. Mitchell?" "I'm Edward Simmons." "Thank you for seeing us," Sarah began, but Dr. Simmons raised a hand gently. "Before we continue, I need to verify something. Ms. Matthews, do you have any identification proving you are Sarah Matthews? And any documentation suggesting a connection to Elizabeth Collins?" Sarah produced her driver's license and the sealed letter Elizabeth had left in the storage unit. Dr. Simmons read it carefully, then nodded. "Elizabeth has spoken of you often, the daughter she hoped would someday find her." His use of present tense sent a wave of relief through Sarah. "She's been a remarkable patient, both in her resilience and her unwavering hope. Then she's still alive, Sarah whispered. Still here. She is. The experimental treatment has stabilized her condition, though I must be honest, she remains seriously ill. She's currently in our long-term care facility connected to the main hospital. Can we see her? David asked, his voice tight with emotion. Dr. Simmons considered them thoughtfully. Elizabeth's condition includes periods of confusion due to medications and treatments. She has good days and difficult ones. He turned to Sarah. Your pregnancy is visibly advanced. Seeing you like this, without preparation, might be overwhelming for her. But you'll tell her we're here. Ask if she wants to see us? Yes, I have rounds there this afternoon. I'll speak with her personally. He wrote something on a card. My direct number. Call me at 4 o'clock and I'll let you know her response. As they left the office, Sarah felt a confusing mixture of emotions. Relief that Elizabeth was alive, anxiety about her condition, uncertainty about whether she would want visitors. The baby moved restlessly, as if sensing her turmoil. 2 more hours, David said gently, checking his watch. Let's get you to your appointment, then find something to eat. Whatever happens next, we've come this far. Elizabeth is alive, and she knows we've been looking for her. Sarah nodded, placing a protective hand on her belly. After all this time, she murmured, we're just 1 floor away from each other. At precisely 4 o'clock, Sarah dialed Dr. Simmons' number, her hand trembling slightly. David sat beside her in the hospital cafeteria, his coffee untouched. Ms. Matthews, Dr. Simmons answered promptly. I've spoken with Elizabeth. Sarah held her breath. She would like to see you. Both of you. His voice softened. She was quite emotional about the news, but in a positive way. I believe this visit could be beneficial for her. Relief washed over Sarah. When can we come up? Now would be fine. 5th floor of the Lakeside building, room 5117. I've informed the staff you're coming. David drove them to the appropriate entrance, where a volunteer helped Sarah into a wheelchair, despite her protests that she could walk. Hospital policy for anyone over 36 weeks, the volunteer explained cheerfully, wheeling her toward the elevator. As they ascended to the 5th floor, Sarah's nervousness intensified. What would she say to the woman who had given her life but never known her? What could possibly bridge the decades of separation? The long-term care unit was quieter than the main hospital, with softer lighting and a less clinical feel. A nurse at the station nodded as they approached. Elizabeth is having a good day, she said quietly. But please keep the visit brief. She tires easily. Room 5017 had a small sitting area separated from the bed by a privacy curtain. The nurse led them in, then disappeared behind the curtain briefly. Elizabeth, your visitors are here. There was a murmured response. The nurse reappeared, nodding encouragingly. She's ready. Just remember, she's physically quite changed from the photographs you might have seen. Sarah wheeled herself forward, David following close behind. As they rounded the curtain, she got her first real glimpse of her birth mother. Elizabeth Collins sat propped against pillows, a knitted shawl around her shoulders, despite the warm June day. Her hair, what remained of it, was completely white, and her face bore the hollow-cheeked gauntness of someone whose body had been at war with itself. But her eyes, the same deep blue that Sarah saw in her own mirror, were alert and luminous. Those eyes widened as she took in Sarah's wheelchair. Her prominent belly, "You're pregnant," Elizabeth whispered. The first words spoken between mother and daughter in 43 years. Sarah moved closer to the bed. Yes, a girl. She's due in about 4 weeks, may I? Elizabeth gestured weakly towards Sarah's belly. Sarah wheeled herself to the bedside, taking Elizabeth's thin hand and placing it where the baby had been most active. As if on cue, there was a decisive kick. Elizabeth's face transformed with wonder. She's strong, like her grandmother, Sarah said softly. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. How did you find me? After all this time. I bought your storage unit at auction, Sarah explained. Your things. They led me to you. Step by step. The storage unit, Elizabeth repeated. Of course. When I got too ill to manage my affairs, I forgot about the payments. Her gaze shifted to David, who had remained respectfully near the doorway. Her expression froze in disbelief. David Mitchell. He stepped forward, emotion etched deeply in his face. "Hello, Lizzie. I don't understand," Elizabeth said, looking between them. "How? We found each other through you," David explained gently. "Sarah discovered your letters, the photographs. When she realized you might be her birth mother, she came looking for me too." "You never knew," Elizabeth said, the words somewhere between a question and a statement. "About our daughter, I know now," David replied, his voice rough with feeling. "I know about both of our daughters." Elizabeth closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed. "I wanted to tell you. Back then, my father—" "Catherine told me everything," Sarah interjected softly. "How your father sent you away, how you weren't allowed to contact David, and later how he threatened to cut off Catherine's college funding if you kept me." "You've spoken to Catherine?" Sarah nodded. "She sends her love and her apology." Elizabeth seemed to struggle with this information. She was just a teenager herself. "I couldn't let her future be ruined because of my situation." She looked at Sarah with sudden intensity. "I need you to understand, giving you up wasn't what I wanted. Either time. With your sister, I was too young, too scared to fight. With you, I thought I was strong enough to be a single mother, but when my father threatened Catherine—" "I understand," Sarah assured her, squeezing her hand. "Really, I do. I had wonderful adoptive parents who loved me completely. And now, finding you, finding both of you," she glanced at David, "it feels like completing a circle." "Did you read my letter?" Elizabeth asked. "The one I left in the false bottom of the box?" Sarah nodded. "That's how I knew you were still alive 6 months ago. It gave me hope I might find you in time." "In time," Elizabeth repeated, her gaze returning to Sarah's belly, "to meet my granddaughter. We thought—" David began, then paused, clearing his throat. "We've been discussing names. If you approve, we'd like to include Elizabeth somewhere in her name." Fresh tears spilled down Elizabeth's hollow cheeks. "After all these years of searching, hoping, and you found me. Both of you found me." The baby kicked again, a series of fluttering movements beneath Elizabeth's hand. "She knows," Elizabeth whispered. "She knows she's where she belongs." For a moment, 4 generations existed in that small hospital room. Elizabeth, Sarah, the unborn baby, and the genetic connection to David that had helped bring them all together. "Tell me everything," Elizabeth said, her voice stronger now. "Tell me about your life, about how you found the storage unit, about your journey to find me. I want to hear it all." Sarah began their story as David pulled chairs closer to the bed. The minutes stretched into an hour, none of them noting the passing time, as decades of separation began to heal in the simple sharing of their stories. The week following their reunion passed in a blur of emotions and practical arrangements. Sarah's appointment with the specialist had gone well, with the doctor clearing her for the careful drive home, as long as she returned to bed rest immediately afterward. But leaving Elizabeth so soon after finding her seemed impossible. David provided the solution. "My sabbatical starts next week," he explained. "I've already arranged for a short-term rental apartment near the medical center. Sarah can stay with me until her doctor approves travel. And we'll both be close to Elizabeth." Dr. Wilson, consulted via video call, had reluctantly agreed to transfer Sarah's care temporarily to the Cleveland specialist. "Only because your blood pressure has stabilized," she cautioned. "And only because I understand how important this is." Now, 7 days after their first meeting, Sarah sat beside Elizabeth's bed, sorting through photographs from the wooden box. Each image prompted stories, Elizabeth filling in the missing details of her life, Sarah sharing parallel moments from her own. "This was my first apartment after nursing school," Elizabeth said, pointing to a faded photograph of a young woman standing proudly before a modest building. "It was tiny, just 1 room plus a bathroom, but it was mine. I felt so independent. I had a place just like that after college," Sarah told her. "The shower was so small, I had to open the bathroom door to wash my hair." Elizabeth laughed, the sound still surprising after years of illness had weakened her. Each day, she seemed a little stronger, a little more present. Dr. Simmons had noted the improvement in her latest assessment, though he remained cautiously realistic about her prognosis. The experimental treatment is showing promise, he'd explained privately to Sarah and David. But Elizabeth's cancer is advanced. These good days are precious, but prepare yourselves for difficult ones too. Today was unquestionably a good day. Elizabeth sat up in a chair rather than her bed, a colourful scarf wrapped elegantly around her head. Her fingers worked steadily at the baby blanket she'd started knitting, determined to finish it before her granddaughter's arrival. "Blue and yellow," she explained, holding up the soft yarn. "Not pink. Girls get typecast enough without starting at birth." David arrived with lunch, homemade soup and fresh bread from the cafe across from his temporary apartment. The three had fallen into a comfortable routine, with David spending mornings at the university library researching Elizabeth's condition and potential treatments, then joining the women for lunch and afternoon visits. "I've been thinking," he said as they ate, "about practical matters. Sarah's lease ends next month, and the apartment isn't really suitable for a baby anyway." Sarah nodded. With her limited income and the expenses of pregnancy, housing had been a persistent worry. "I have a suggestion," David continued. "My house has a detached guest cottage in the back garden. It's small but comfortable, one bedroom, living area, kitchen. It's been sitting empty since my last sabbatical student graduated. Sarah, you and the baby would be welcome to use it for as long as you like." "That's incredibly generous," Sarah began, touched by the offer. "Wait, there's more to this idea," David said. "Elizabeth, once you're released from treatment, you could stay in my spare bedroom. The main house is all on one level, easy to navigate during recovery. You'd have privacy, but Sarah and the baby would be just across the garden." Elizabeth's hands stilled on her knitting. "You're suggesting we all live together? After 50 years apart, near each other?" David clarified. "Connected but independent. A family compound of sorts." The word family hung in the air between them, new and fragile, yet somehow right. "It sounds perfect," Sarah said quietly. "But my job, my life in Springfield, there are bookkeeping positions in Columbus," Elizabeth pointed out. "And with the trust fund I set up for you, you'd have time to find the right opportunity." Sarah's eyes widened. "You're really considering this?" Elizabeth exchanged a look with David. "We've been discussing it," she admitted. "When you're not here. My treatment protocol runs for another 8 weeks. After that, I'll need somewhere to recover." She hesitated. "The prognosis is uncertain, but I want whatever time I have to count, to make up for lost years," David added softly. "Not make up for them," Elizabeth corrected. "Nothing can do that. But to create new memories, to know my granddaughter, to be the family we never had the chance to be." Sarah felt the baby shift and kick, as if registering her vote on the matter. "My lease does end next month," she said thoughtfully. "And starting somewhere new with family support might be exactly what the baby and I need." David smiled, the first unguarded, truly joyful expression Sarah had seen from him. Then it settled. "We'll make it work." Over the next few days, they began sorting through Elizabeth's belongings from the storage unit, deciding what to keep for the new living arrangement. Elizabeth was particularly moved by the rocking chair Sarah had found and sold. "My grandmother's," she confirmed when shown a photograph. "I always imagined using it to rock my babies." Sarah felt a pang of regret. "I'm sorry I sold it. If I'd known you needed the money," Elizabeth interrupted gently. "You were doing what was necessary to care for yourself and your baby. Don't apologize for that." 2 days later, Mr. Harmon arrived with a surprise, the rocking chair, restored to gleaming perfection. "The buyer was quite understanding when I explained the situation," he said, looking pleased with himself. "I may have paid a small premium to reacquire it, but some things belong with their rightful owners." As the chair was positioned beside Elizabeth's hospital bed, something seemed to settle into place. 4 generations connected through this single piece of furniture. Elizabeth's grandmother, Elizabeth herself, Sarah, and the baby, soon to join them. "Perfect," Elizabeth whispered, running her thin hand along the polished wood. "Now we're ready to welcome her properly." The first contraction woke Sarah at 3:17 a.m. a dull ache that wrapped around her lower back and tightened across her abdomen. She breathed through it, counting silently as Dr. Wilson had taught her. 37 seconds. Probably just Braxton Hicks again. She shifted in the unfamiliar bed, trying to find a comfortable position. The guest cottage David had prepared for her was cozy and welcoming, but she'd only moved in 3 days ago. Everything still felt new. When the second contraction came 14 minutes later, stronger than the first, Sarah knew this wasn't a false alarm. She was 3 weeks early. She called David's number. He answered immediately, as if he hadn't been asleep at all. "The baby's coming," she said simply. What followed was a carefully orchestrated plan they'd prepared weeks ago. David drove Sarah to the hospital while making calls. First to Dr. Wilson, who had returned to Springfield but wanted updates. Then to Elizabeth's night nurse to explain the situation. "Elizabeth has special permission to attend the birth," David explained to the admitting nurse at the maternity ward. "She's the patient's birth mother, and she's currently in treatment in the Lakeside building. We'll need approval from her doctor," the nurse replied. "Already arranged," Sarah managed between contractions. "Now coming every 8 minutes. Dr. Simmons cleared it. Please call him." By dawn, Sarah was fully dilated, her labor progressing with unexpected speed for a first-time mother. The delivery room staff had been augmented by a wheelchair-bound Elizabeth, positioned near Sarah's head, her medical ports and IV pole temporarily disconnected under Dr. Simmons' supervision. "You're doing beautifully," Elizabeth murmured, wiping Sarah's forehead with a cool cloth. "Strong and brave, just like I knew you would be." David waited anxiously in the family area, pacing as he had 50 years earlier when Elizabeth had disappeared from his life, pregnant with their first child. This time he was present, included, aware of the miracle unfolding. At 7:42 a.m., after a final exhausting push, Sarah's daughter entered the world with a powerful cry that seemed to fill the delivery room. The obstetrician placed the infant on Sarah's chest, tiny and perfect, her face scrunched in indignation at her sudden eviction. "Hello, little one," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We've been waiting for you." Elizabeth reached out a trembling hand to touch the baby's dark hair. "She's magnificent," she breathed, her own tears falling freely. The nurse approached with forms. "Have you decided on a name?" Sarah nodded. "Margaret Elizabeth. Margaret for Elizabeth's mother, who wrote all those letters that helped me find my way, and Elizabeth," she looked up at her birth mother, "for the strongest woman I know." Later, when mother and baby had been settled in a recovery room, David was finally allowed to join them. He entered cautiously, overwhelmed by the tableau before him. Sarah propped up in bed, holding the newborn. Elizabeth seated beside them, the 3 generations of women linked by blood, and now by conscious choice. "Would you like to hold your great-granddaughter?" Sarah asked, offering the bundled infant. David accepted the tiny package with reverent hands. "She has your chin," he told Elizabeth, studying the baby's face. "And your eyes, I think, though it's too soon to tell for certain. The Matthews nose, though," Sarah added with a smile. "That's definitely from my adoptive father's side." A nurse appeared with a camera. "Family photo?" They arranged themselves carefully. Sarah in the bed holding Margaret, Elizabeth and David on either side, their faces alight with wonder and joy. The flash captured the moment. 4 generations connected after decades of separation, the circle finally complete. The following weeks brought rapid changes. Elizabeth's doctors, noting her improved spirits and renewed determination, adjusted her treatment protocol. "No guarantees," Dr. Simmons cautioned, "but her response has been remarkable." We're cautiously optimistic. Sarah and baby Margaret settled into the guest cottage, establishing a routine that included daily visits to the main house where Elizabeth was now residing in David's care. The rocking chair from the storage unit had found its permanent home in the cottage's nursery, where Elizabeth often sat with her granddaughter, singing lullabies she had never had the chance to share with her own children. One evening, As summer faded toward autumn, the family gathered on David's porch. Margaret slept peacefully in Elizabeth's arms, while Sarah and David sorted through more items from the storage unit. The final boxes they'd retrieved from Mr. Harmon's temporary safekeeping. I've been thinking, Sarah said, setting aside a stack of Elizabeth's nursing journals. About the storage unit, about how everything unfolded. Regrets? Elizabeth asked gently. No, Sarah replied firmly. The opposite, actually. I've been thinking about purpose, how something that seemed so random, so desperate at the time, led to all of this. She gestured to their assembled family. One impulsive bid at an auction changed everything. Perhaps not so random, David suggested, his academic mind always searching for patterns. Of all the people at that auction, you were the one who recognized value in what others dismissed. You saw potential where others saw only junk. I was just looking for something to sell, Sarah admitted. Maybe at first, Elizabeth acknowledged, but you kept digging following the breadcrumbs long after you'd sold the valuable furniture. Something in you responded to the story hidden in those boxes. Sarah smiled, watching her daughter's tiny hand curl around Elizabeth's finger. From desperation to completion, from isolation to family, the journey had transformed them all. I was thinking about the other storage units, she said. All those abandoned possessions, the stories locked inside them. Maybe that's what I'm meant to do next. Help connect people with their histories, their forgotten treasures. The storage unit whisperer, David suggested with a smile, has a certain ring to it. Elizabeth gazed down at her granddaughter. Whatever comes next, we face it together. No more lost years, no more separation. Margaret stirred and opened her eyes, the same deep blue that connected her to Elizabeth, to Sarah, and through unexpected genetic pathways, to David as well. No more separation, Sarah agreed, placing her hand over Elizabeth's, completing the circle of touch that linked them all together.